Hello and welcome to From the BON. This is the debrief of Burnley's 3-1 after extra time win at Reading in the FA Cup. Well, we got used to FA Cup times being fairly drab reserve team games, but this was anything but boring. In fact, you could argue it was one of the more interesting Clarets games for some time. For starters, we had a 4-2-4 lineup with a midfield that consisted of two teenagers in Tommy McDermott and Joe Bowers, the youngest Burnley midfield to have been fielded for many a year. In contrast, up front, we had one of the oldest strike pairings we've seen for ages. In fact, goodness knows when we had two 35-year-olds up front. This time it was in the form of J. Rodriguez and the recently returned Ashley Barnes. We also had a completely new face in Oliver Sonnet at right back, and to top it all, we had the remarkably rare occurrence of Magic Mike Tresor on the field. And if that wasn't unique enough, he also provided a perfect assist to put the Clarets in front in extra time. 2 goals from substitute Zian Fleming in extra time did the job for Scott Parker's side after Lyle Foster's 71st minute opener was cancelled out just 6 minutes later by a long-range strike from Lewis Wing, which somehow got through the body of Vaclav Havlatki in the Burnley goal. A surprisingly decent amount to talk about then for an FA Cup turn. I'm Simon Evans, and with me are Greavesy, Woody and Justin. Woody, let's start off with the Joshless teenage midfield. A fair gamble putting all that responsibility on 2 young lads. How did you rate how they coped?
I thought they did extraordinarily well. Like you, to have 11 changes, you always expect with FA Cup games, don't you, that all of a sudden this wonderful football that you've been seeing throughout the season gets upended and tipped over by having stodgy performances like Tottenham at Tamworth or whatever. But we're kind of the opposite way around, aren't we? We're kind of stodgy week in, week out. We throw a load of kids in and whatnot, and all of a sudden we turn into this free-flowing, progressive football side. But I thought McDermott looked had an extremely nice touch, didn't he? And Barres did a lot of cleaning up. And you would have thought that removing that midfield would have been the weakest point, but it coped admirably well. Like you were saying earlier, how much possession we had in the first half, and J-Rod and Bash were helping them through it. Sonai on the right looked an absolutely class act, and it just seemed to be like as the game progressed, you didn't object even to it going into extra time, and seeing how we coped and developed.
Sure.
Us to come back and, I mean, granted, it was Reading and we effectively dropped a division, but I thought the way that we played, we coped with it. Only the minor aberration with whatever Haladki was doing with that shot. But it seemed to be that, it transformed into everybody suddenly started playing a little bit like Parker. The idea of being able to, take a ball and move and face in the right direction and lay off a little pass. From the little passes from Tresor when he came on were exquisite. And it's the kind of thing that we've been missing. This idea of like that Koleosho being this direct player who isn't able to play that little dinky ball in the same way that Tresor can. And all of a sudden we were finding these little passes that could unlock defences. And you can see that as we move on in, the championship business end, the idea of the Tresor as if he stays and whatever happens to him, God only knows. But these little balls to unlock defences, you can see where it's going. And this version of Parker Ball hopefully continues, and I think we'll reap some damn fine dividends out of it. But overall, I thought it was a very good, interesting, and well worth the free trial that I got for ESPN Plus.
Yeah, it's weird that it's actually the game's broadcast on TV in America and not in the UK. It is ridiculous. We'll have to talk about that whole business of the 3 p.m. It doesn't work for the FA Cup at all. Whatever justification there is for doing that during the league season, when there was no danger of Aki Stanley fans not going to Liverpool because they could watch Burnley versus Reading. It's ridiculous. But anyway, Greavesy, you did manage to find a way to watch the game, crawling out of your sick bed to keep your record up of watching the Clarets this season. Let's just talk a little bit about them two midfielders. It's an interesting point Woody makes about the Parker-esqueness of it, because there was something about, actually, the way McDermott in particular played, where that didn't cross my mind that there was, looks like he might have been doing a bit of personal coaching with them, but it was a pretty impressive display from them two lads, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think you've got this, you've got these two young lads. We know our midfield has been the best kind of part of most of the team this season. We've raved about Josh Brownhill in certain roles. We've raved about Josh Cullen and Laurent, but certainly the two lads kind of who've come into side, no first team football really, apart from the odd kind of cup appearance and odd kind of sub appearance, if you will, playing well by all accounts in the kind of kids teams, if you will, at the turf and whatnot. But yeah, I think I think as fans you want to see that, don't you? You want to see young players coming through from the academy into the first team. You look on with envy at some of the kind of clubs that are able to bring these players through. And I know we've had this chat before, Simon. I think the first conversation you had with Alan Pace, perhaps even off the record, was, they want to develop young British talent, and we want that. We want to be able to kind of see players coming through, and players want to see a pathway. Now, these two might disappear and we won't see them again. We might see him in the next round of the Cup, whoever we get. And, I think we were all hoping we'd have the result of the Cup draw whilst we were recording this, but United Arsenal has gone on to extra time. But I think it's definitely important. I think, to make 11 changes, we no longer have the kind of, the criticism of managers who make all these changes, do we? I mean, I remember being in a Mick McCarthy press conference at Wolves, I think it was a good few years ago, where he was taking pelters because midweek before the Burnley game, he'd rested 9 players for an FA Cup tie or a replay, something like that. And he was, look, we're fighting on several fronts. For Parker, it was a real chance to A, try things out, B, have a look and get minutes into players who've perhaps not played as much. And it was good to see Worrell back. I thought Worrell was superb. Mike Tresor, I'm sure, will dedicate a full kind of 45 minutes in a couple of minutes to the magic of Mike. But it's all of those things, with the constant churn of league games, it's really difficult for Parker to be able to experiment and try new things out, especially when he looks to have settled on almost a league side. So yeah, the lineup, the formation, the way we came out the blocks early doors, you kind of think to yourself, actually, you know what? We've got a bit in reserve here. And clearly, they're not just going and spending a couple of days pre-Reading going, right, I tell you what, everything we've worked on this season, let's get it and let's work on something new. Clearly, there's pockets of what we've been trying to work on with the whole squad. And we're certainly seeing in cup games, or the cup game, I should say. And then we're seeing perhaps in some of the latter league games, certain parts of those ideas coming to fruition in different parts of the pitch. And if we can meld all that together, like Woody said, I think we'll reap, untold benefits in the latter half of the season.
Yeah, Justin, I mean, it's interesting that the commentary I was listening to, the guy was driving me a little bit mad by going on about this Burnley defensive record, the record of this Burnley defence. And I'm saying, like, well, none of these players really, apart from Perez now and then, have been part of this defence. It's a completely different defence. Greaves' got a point there, hasn't he, really, that there was a familiar look and approach to the game. I mean, the fact that it was 0-0 after 70 minutes, despite us dominating possession, we were still playing Scott Parker's football despite having a completely different side out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the same formation, same sort of style, same sort of approach, really. And I thought Greaves is completely right when he says it looks like we've got a little bit in reserve. I have to say, I'm not a massive fan of this treating cup games as if they're reserve games. I don't see. I mean, if you're going to enter a cup competition, you want to try and win it, don't you? I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we might go some distance in the FA Cup. So to risk like going out in the first hurdle when you've fielded what's effectively a second string side, I think is I mean, I understand the need, obviously, to rotate a little bit and rest players and try new things, but to change the entire side for a cup game, I think I don't like it. I want us to put our best team out to win every game, and it's always annoyed me, that sort of thing. I know everybody does it now, but I mean, obviously we got away with it. I think we need to remember that we're playing against a side from a lower division than ours. Not get too carried away with it. But I thought there's very, very few negatives came out of it, and I think you're right, Simon. It was in it more interesting than a lot of the league games we've been watching over the last few months, just because of the difference in personnel and the chance to have a look at players that we've not seen before. Those two teenagers in the midfield did really well. I thought J-Rod did a great job in sort of dropping deep and helping them out, and his distribution was pretty good as well. And the good, I mean, I think we would have finished them off in normal time had it not been for that goalkeeping error. I mean, you can't hold that against him. Everybody makes mistakes, don't they, every now and again? And like, if a goalkeeper makes a mistake, it can be a catastrophe. But I thought he did pretty well for the rest of the game. I thought he did okay. And to see Ekdal back on the pitch was great. To see Foster get a goal, it's all positive, isn't it? It's all good stuff. So I'm looking forward to. I think those two lads in the middle of the pitch, I think they did enough for me to sort of be on the fringes of getting on the bench and maybe getting a bit of time in the Championship. It might mean that we don't have to sign John Joe Shelvey, which is obviously something that I'm very keen to avoid at this point.
Well, it also might explain why we loaned out Masengo. If you've got two players like that, if Masengo would have come in and played like Tommy McDermott, we'd be saying, you know what, Masengo's a decent player. He should be getting more of a chance. I thought both of them did really well, but McDermott, that little bit of skill inside the box where he took it from one foot to the other to create a bit of space. For me, one of the big positives, and I've criticised him quite a lot since he's been at the club, was Lyle Foster, because he's playing out on the left, which he's played in that position before, but it does give us something else. And they are a League One side who might be a Championship side next year. They're not far off the playoffs, but they're a League One side. But what he faced when they backed up the box in front of him and he had no room to get off a shot whatsoever and managed to work enough space to fire up an absolute thunderblaster of a shot with no backlift whatsoever, that could be done against any level of opposition. And I thought Foster was for me, probably in terms of what's going to impact the actual starting 11 in the next few games, Foster's performance was the biggest positive, along with Sonnet, who I think looked like he's almost a carbon copy, dare I say it, an upgraded version of Connor Roberts, in that he can play in all those roles, formed a good partnership with Koleosho. He came in and did like Roberts does that bit in the middle. He's an international footballer. He's going to be, I think, we're looking at that performance in terms of like what could inject something extra into the 11. I'd say that Foster and Sonny were both made decent claims for that as well. I mean, what else caught your eye, Woody?
I think you're absolutely right with regards to Foster out on the left. That's a very nice little option to have, isn't it? Because we're probably thinking we're a little bit winger light, aren't we? In terms of what we've got, and to have that's a slightly different option. And he didn't look confused out there. He looked like he knew what he had to do, and that he executed a lot of his stuff extremely well and looked like a goal threat, like you said. I thought Reading weren't just there. After the first 20 minutes, you thought this should be a hiding if we could put a shooting boots on. They looked like they were there for the taking. But they suddenly came at us a little bit, and as makeshift defence was under a little bit of pressure, and I thought we coped with that relatively well. We did have some defending to do, and I was quite impressed with the way that we did it. But I think overall the way that we played, like I was just saying, it wasn't necessarily Parker ball, it was more Parker-esque as a player. And you could see that if you had 11 Parkers out there, my word, you'd be a side, But I'm going to give Tresor quite a little bit of credit as a player, and it's something that we are definitely missing. It's just an element of quality, and I really do want to know what the story is behind that, because it's ridiculous that somebody with that level of quality is just hovering about. He would piss being able to win that centre spot challenge. But it seems like he's just been stuck at the centre spot, on the razzle dazzle or whatever. And it's just ridiculous that somebody with that level of apparent ability isn't playing in some capacity. Impeccable. And
I found it an extraordinary cameo, really. And it was always bound to be, I think, with Mike Tresor, wasn't it? It would be unlikely if there wasn't a talking point out of a Mike Tresor appearance for Burnley this season. But he looked world-class for 10 minutes. And then whether it was the situation of the game or whether he was completely knackered or whether he couldn't be bothered anymore or he just totally switched off then. Having created a goal with a beautifully weighted pass to Fleming. What did you make of Magic Mike's moments?
Well, I think, again, we'd all love to know what the story is, right? That's the kind of... I don't think we'll ever know it. I think somebody will write a PhD. I said this before on, Mike Tresor at Burnley in the future, and we might get close. But I think... I genuinely think that, and the more I think about it, watch yesterday and his appearance and things like that, I wonder whether it's gone from a physical issue to a mental issue. And I'm not talking about maybe, deep underlying mental health issues like Foster, but I wonder if it's that kind of, you're so long without doing something in front of people. Because you look at the training pictures, he looks happy. He goes to the hospital before Christmas with the rest of the players, he's smiling, he's dishing out shirts, he's done a bit of modelling for the club shop and all this. So I wonder whether there becomes almost this mental block of, he's had injuries, he's had niggles. We believe he was quite ill during the summer, not had any confirmation about the level of illness and what it was. Parker's alluded to it, and I think, from perhaps conversations we've had individually and collectively, I think there's, there is certain health issues that he had during the summer. I wonder whether this first appearance might be that kind of, getting over the hump of not appearing and playing football in front of people. It might not be. I could be completely wide of the mark. I think the physical aspect of it is, I think he was just fucking knackered. I think he was literally just so long without playing football at a competitive level, albeit against a League One side. I think it's that, we all know what it's like, don't you? I've got my first five-a-side league game post-Christmas tomorrow, and I'm going to be peak Mike Tresor. I'll be a world beater for a minute and a half. I'll run into a corner in chase of somebody, and then I'll be blowing out my arse for the other 38 and a half minutes, getting the piss taken out of me by the referee more often than not, etc., etc. So I think Tresor yesterday was really good, and Woody, I think Woody touched upon weight of pass. How many times have we seen passes this season, the wrong weight, and you kind of go, that's broken down because that's not been hit at the right weight. Someone like Tresor, clearly, the little ball into Humphreys for the third goal, it's that little, we've missed that, haven't we? I think, Woody, you mentioned right at the start about Collie Oshaw, that little dinking or that little, we often get the weight of the pass wrong. Whereas someone like Tresor, that's the thing that appears to come quite naturally. The kind of outward display of being arsed and the commitment perhaps is the thing that doesn't naturally come naturally to Mike Tresor. But I think we'd rather have somebody who's a little bit aloof, a little bit standoffish, clearly liked by his teammates. Like I say, he's always in pictures laughing and joking with them in training. But I just wonder whether, that he'll take a lot from that yesterday in terms of he's got an assist. Yeah, you know what? After 10 minutes, he looked knackered. He was blowing out of his arse, hands on both knees, etc. But I just wonder whether we've perhaps got over a mental block because it just felt like, he had a dead leg. He's been a bit stop-start and then he's ill. That to me doesn't feel, it's either really bad run of health and a bad run of luck, which people can have, or it is, you know what? I just don't know how to do this anymore. And I need somebody to kind of go, I'm really sorry, but you are going to be playing. And that little cameo against Reading, when we've almost said to him, you know what, go and help us win this, is that Parker's, man management in terms of, you throw him on at the turf in a game against Preston North End or Blackburn, and he does, nothing comes off for him, and Burnley fans, can't wait to queue up and say, I told you so, he's a waste of money, get him out of my club, blah, blah, blah. Away at Reading, where we know away fans are a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more kind of supportive. Yeah, it sounds bad, but you know what I mean? We talked about pressure at the turf before. get out there and just show us what you can do. You've done work out, we'll ship you off to, Portugal or back to Belgium or Holland, wherever you want to go. But you go out there, show us what you can do. And I think he showed us. And one swallow don't make a spring, as Stan Turner used to say. But I just wonder whether the mental block of trying to get him into a Burnley shirt out on a pitch, we've beat that block. And the next stage is, you know what? Let's go on. Let's see if you can be in the squad and a chance again. If he suddenly racks up 2 assists in 2 games and we get a win, suddenly then he's kind of thinking, right, maybe he's one of them players. I don't know the guy, but maybe he's one of those kind of players who needs that man management, especially because I think he was badly mistreated by Vincent Kompany last year, like a lot of those players were, let's not forget. 1 minute you're in the match squad, 1 minute you had 7 weeks walking around the fucking Trafford Centre because you were nowhere near the match day squad. That must do something to a player who I believe was the season before top assists or something like that in Belgium. I can't remember what there was stat.
I think I did see that mentioned somewhere.
Yeah. Nobody mentions it, but he's obviously got quality. That's my theory. Listen,
it's quite a convincing theory, I have to say, Greavesy. And if that's again massive credit to Scott Parker, if that's what he's done, if he's managed the bloke back from like wanting to be out of the door and having all those issues that you're talking about. I mean, we're totally speculating here because no one's telling us. I don't quite understand why we can't get a bit of a steer from the club or the fans can't be given some indication, because if that's true, and it's a feasible theory, if that's true, it would be extremely unfair of the fans to turn on him on the turf, wouldn't it, if that's the situation? And yet, with the zero information, you can't blame a fan for looking at it and say this guy's been stealing a wage for a year and a half, So it's actually quite dangerous that we don't get told what's going on with Mike Tresor unless there's some massive confidentiality factor or whatever. I mean, a lot of us just presumed after the summer it was a contractual thing because he wanted out. Now, did he want out because of the way he was treated by Vincent Kompany? Which is what you're suggesting, and that's also entirely feasible. And have we, as Parker, just gradually worked with this guy and tried to find a way to reintegrate him? And we don't know. It's ridiculous that we don't know. But as you say, he did look class with those touches. I mean, Justin, it's a mystery that we don't have the answer to. Is your gut feeling, which is all we can go off really, that Tresor might be being reintegrated and be a factor this season, or is this just a little cameo before we flog him in a week?
Well, I don't see the point in doing that. I don't see the point in having him in the squad if we're not trying to reintegrate him back into playing regularly. What does that make him more of a prospect if he's come on and shown a few touches? Does that make him more attractive to somebody who might be willing to offer him a contract? I don't think it does. I mean, I take the point Greaves is making. Last season was very traumatic for a lot of, for us as much as anybody else, but for a lot of those players, and the season did not go well for Mike Tresor, did it? I mean, when he did make it onto the pitch, he didn't cover himself in any glory. And I think he was badly treated. And you could understand why he would be, suffering some sort of post-traumatic stress from the way that all went down, especially given the fanfare that it brought him to the club. We had very, very high hopes for him, didn't we? Everybody did. We were quite excited by that signing. But I don't see the point in bringing him on for a few minutes. Extraordinary, though, I must say, that a professional footballer, is that knackered after that short space of time. Presumably he trains every day with the squad, and he's. I don't understand how. I mean, I could probably run around for longer than that, and I'm twice his age, and I don't train every day.
I'm not convinced he was knackered, though. Really, I mean, my feeling watching it, I know. Greaves and Woody have both suggested that he was, and we can all be deceived by things. But my feeling at the time was he'd come on, he'd been told won the game, and said, "Right, I've done my job now.
Can I go home now?
And let's just keep the ball, manage the game out. We don't need to go taking people on. I'll just pass it inside now. We're just running down the clock," which we did do. Once we got 3-1, we ran the clock down. It weren't just him. I don't know, but sorry, carry on.
I mean, it's extraordinary if he was knackered. I mean, a professional footballer of that age to not be able to run around longer than 10 minutes, it strikes me as ludicrous. But the big thing now is what happens next, doesn't it? Is he on the bench in a league game? Is he being reintegrated into the squad in that way? It'd be great if he was. If he doesn't leave us before the end of this month, and we can have a bit of that class, because like everybody says, he's got that ball that gets us behind defences that we haven't got really from anybody else or rarely. So it would be great, but I don't see the point in him putting him on the pitch at all if we're just looking to get rid of him. And it strikes me that we are a bit light in those sort of wide positions, so he would be useful. He would be, an addition to that depth that we need. And he's got something a bit different to what the other players are. So I hope to see him on the bench at least. And I think if he is on the bench, then that is a sign that we are trying to get him back into the squad. And it'd be a remarkable feat of man management if we do get him playing and do get him playing well.
Yeah, I mean, after this performance, Woody, I mean, there's going to be quite a battle to be on the bench, though, isn't there? Because, you could well turn around and say, you know what, a young player like Tommy McDermott, who's come in and done as well as he did, it's a little bit disappointing to not even make the bench for the next game. But you could say that about quite a few players who were involved yesterday. And we can't have 11 subs. So even with all the injuries we've got, and we moan about options and depth and stuff, there's still quite a few players who weren't involved yesterday at all. Benson, Bayer, Ramsey. There's players who've been out for a while. Delcroix was on the bench but didn't get on, did he? I don't think.
I didn't.
No. So
Ekdal came on, didn't he? Yeah.
Delcroix looks like, to me, like prime January loan material, because that's a bit of a blow, isn't it? If you've sat there watching and then this is the game where everyone gets a chance who hasn't been featured and you're on the bench and don't get on, you'd be thinking it's time to move on after that, wouldn't you? But who do you think is knocking on that door now to either be on the bench who hasn't been, or is there anybody from that performance yesterday?
Well, I've just seen on the Twitters that both Ekdal and Delcroix are being touted for a move away this January. So they look like the pair of them might be off, and Dodgson's gone, hasn't he? And I can understand kind of getting more playing time for especially our defensive unit. But, I mean, even if, for example, Tresor becomes the new Benson, in so much the fact that he comes on and changes games, or he's capable of changing games in the last 20, then that's going to be a huge boost, because that was one of the main differentiators in his last championship campaign. So having somebody like that, and it means also that you don't have to panic quite so much about the likes of your rushing Ramsey and Bayer, etc., back into the side. They can still, acclimatise and get themselves fit for the rest of the season. But, I mean, you're going to accept it as an academy player. I don't think you're going to throw your toys out, but you would have thought that it's very nice to see that level of application and that level of ability, knowing that is maybe your third string to come onto the bench. You feel a little bit more confident, even though, yes, let's talk about Joe Shelby. You feel a lot more confident as a fan with what went on yesterday and what we've got in reserve. I think we've said earlier. So I think there's a lot of positives in terms of the squad, in terms of how they performed and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'd be sad to see Ekdal leave. Yeah. I mean, if it's a loan just for a few months to get him up to speed for next season better, then that's one thing. But if it's a loan with a view to a permanent move and he's on his way out, I'd be a bit sad about that, because he's looked class at times, hasn't he, Ekdal? In fact, I just saw Connor Roberts on his Instagram. Ekdal posted a picture about good to be back on the field and so on, and Connor Roberts in the comments said, the IKEA Maldini. Which I quite like that one.
What easy to put together.
But, I mean, the other big positive yesterday, I think we should mention as well, is, when you see teams like Liverpool against Stanley, or the big teams playing the smaller teams, and when they just need to actually just stepping up a bit at the end to make sure they don't get beat or they don't have a replay in the past as it was, but now it's penalties. They bring on a couple of players off the bench and it makes a total difference. And that did happen for us yesterday. And it's also a massive positive, surely, Greavesy, to see Zion Fleming coming on off the bench and getting 2 goals like that.
Yeah, I mean, since that Norwich game, he's just started to kind of catch fire, hasn't he, in terms of, got the winner against Rovers, got 2 yesterday. Even the second one was superb awareness for, you'd almost expect an Andy Payton back in the late 90s to be kind of led on his back and, spot that the ball's there and get it past that goalkeeper. We're told he's not a number 9 and we don't think he's a number 9. We know he prefers playing, number 10. But yesterday, I think, you mentioned Foster out wide and that being a big positive. But yeah, Fleming coming on and making such an impact after, again, probably a bit of a stop-start. Didn't have much of a pre-season, had a niggle when he signed, was in the side, then out the side with little injuries. That's a big positive. I mean, on Ekdal, I would suspect it's probably to get him minutes. I think anybody, Parker's not stupid. He must be able to see that he's a good player. But what we have got in Egan and Worrell as our backup centre-halves is 2 players who've won promotion out of that division, 2 players who've been decent players at Premier League level, albeit Worrell, I think, just where he had one good season, then didn't feature much the second season for Forest. So I think it's probably that kind of, look, if we need, we don't want to be in a position now where we put 4 centre-halves on the bench like we have done a couple of times. You don't want to be seeing Delcourt, Ekdal, Egan and Worrell amongst your substitutes. You only need 2 centre-halves. If you're going to bring Tresor back into being, that's great. If you're going to then go, well, actually, McDermott and the other guy, whose name I've gone and forgot, Bowres, there we go. I knew it was something like that. They take up perhaps the 2 spots that the centre-halves, the surplus centre-halves, shall we say, would take up. Suddenly that bench becomes a bit more, we know Ntonji's gone, we know Masengo's gone. It's them little bits where your bench that was 4 centre-halves, a goalkeeper, a youth teamer, suddenly becomes a purposeful bench. You've got a Barnes, he's probably going to be on there. Your J-Rod's probably going to be on there. You might now find a way of getting Foster and Fleming into the side if that might mean Hannibal dropping out because he's played Hannibal on the left. So do we then play Foster on the left? Hannibal drops out. So suddenly your bench becomes stronger by the fact that we've had a decent run out and we've started to find new areas for people to perform in and, we've unearthed a couple of young lads who we think can probably step up. In some of the games like your Plymouths, like your Derby Counties, these teams are struggling, your Cardiffs. We're not going to say you're going to, be playing them against Leeds United at home, perhaps, because that is another step up again. Yeah, I think, the emergence of more options with still more to come, I think is, a massive positive from this weekend.
And Justin, we've talked on quite a few pods about needing a centre forward and that in January we have to sign a centre forward. And then when Ashley Barnes came in, we said, well, this can't be the only one. After yesterday, I'm thinking, if you play Lyle Foster on the left and Jadon Anthony on the right and you play Zion Fleming down the middle, that doesn't create chances and score goals in the Championship, then there's something weird going on because that looks to me like a front 3 that will cause problems for people. Do we still need to go signing a striker, do you think?
Well, I think Foster coming back sort of fills that role more than Barnes coming in. I think it's been suggested Barnes coming back might be a ploy to boost the dressing room a little bit, bring a bit of experience into it, somebody who's done it at this level. And, I find it difficult to believe that he's going to start a lot of games. I find it difficult to believe that he's going to score a lot of goals. But, coming off the bench and making his presence felt might be useful in some of these games. And now, I suppose Fleming's, maybe Fleming's learning to be a number 9 because he's finding the back of the net more in these last few games. And I think those 2 goals at Reading will give him a bit more confidence in that regard. Maybe it will convince him that he is capable of getting on the end of some of these balls and he is capable of doing that job. So I don't know. The bottom line is, I suppose, we are where we are, second in the table without that centre forward we say that we need. I think the signing that we have made in this window so far, another right back, it was probably the most paramount because we were lacking in depth in that position. Struggled a little bit in that period when Roberts was out injured. So maybe you're right.Maybe not. That's not obviously. If there is one, that we fancy and one that we think can do the job, then I have every confidence that we'll go for it. Whether it's a priority, I'm not convinced. I think it depends who it is. There's no point signing a centre forward for signing a centre forward's sake. If we can get one that we like the look of, the options that we've mentioned before on the podcast, maybe
basically.
Yeah, I mean, it seems unlikely that he's going. I think from what I can gather, he's generating quite a bit of interest from other Premier League sides apart from anything else. But I think you made the point in the past that if he came to us, he would certainly get game time and he certainly would get an opportunity to refine his form. But are there other positions on the pitch where we think we might need more reinforcements? I don't know. I think we've got a pretty solid squad now, and I think there'll be more outgoings than incomings, and I'm not really sure that I'd be all that disappointed if we didn't sign anybody. I think we've got a pretty solid squad now, and if these players can start firing again, in the way that they have done over the last few games, then maybe we don't need anybody else.
So all in all, a pretty positive trip to Reading and a pretty positive FA Cup tie. Well, by the time you're listening to this, you'll know who we're playing in the next round. We'll discuss that, and we'll also look ahead to our upcoming game against Sunderland on Friday. Big one to look forward to there. We'll be back on Friday morning with all of that. So until then, have a great week and up the Clarets.